So it's April 2017, and still the left wing, right wing clashes are going on at demonstrations in the United States. I'm not for a second suggesting the US is unique in this, but I think there is particular focus on America because it is such a powerful country. So any sort of notion that this was going to end with Trump's election or with the election is clearly being dispelled. The latest clashes were at Berkeley, the Berkeley campus in California, which has become something of a political hotbed. I guess it always has been. I know there was protests there during the Vietnam War, and it's always been a very politicized university. Many universities are, but it's really become like the vocal point of these clashes between the left and the right. Now, in the latest incident and the latest unrest, apparently there was protests about Donald Trump's tax returns. Um, this is often the trigger for protests around the world, but in the grand scheme of things, it's relatively small fry, compared to some of the things that are going on in either the Trump administration or the world. Anyway, inevitably the Antifa crowd turned up. They're always identifiable because they tend to dress entirely in black. They tend to cover their faces. And they tend to resort to violence. This is very typical. Now, there's a particular chapter, Boston Antifa. They're hailing their demonstration at Berkeley as a victory. I should say there was pro-Trump counter demonstrators there. All I saw from the footage was a bunch of far-left thugs attacking people they disagree with. And I wasn't there. I'm not saying the Trump supporters would have been entirely innocent, but here's the thing. If there's two people fighting and one side covers their faces, I'm going to immediately think that side has more to hide. For all, for whatever your politics is, Trump supporters generally don't cover their face, um, which means that they, common sense dictates that the side that is covering their face feels they have something to hide. That says to me that they're prepared to engage in violence or covering their face because they don't want to be, arrested from CCTV pictures. But it is unfortunate to see this happening on such a consistent basis. And we're not just talking about a bit of shoving, there's some real violence going on here. People ending up with broken noses, bloodied faces. It's getting really toxic. And anyway, there's this one particular chapter, Boston Antifa, and they really summarize the mentality of this movement. Now, there are some who say that this is actually a group set up by alt-right supporters to defame Antifa. I don't know about that. I think Antifa are very good at defaming themselves. So even if let's play the devil's advocate and say this is an entirely fabricated Facebook page, and they're all pro-Trump actors trying to make Antifa look bad. Even if that was the case, there are plenty of other Antifa chapters that are pretty good at making themselves look bad around the world. So, as an organization, I'm highly skeptical of Antifa. Far from being anti-fascists, they behave like a bunch of fascists or communists. Two sides of the same coin, as far as I'm concerned. Um, I don't entirely agree that Trump supporters are entirely innocent. They're sort of playing this card like, oh, look at the far left attacking us. Because during the campaign, there were examples of Trump supporters using aggression. There was clear footage at Trump demonstrations of Trump supporters laying into protesters physically, and the candidate actively encouraging that. But my thinking on this is that this must be a very disillusioning thing to see for American moderates. That is people on the centre right, centre left who look at this and just feel despair. There's always in a democracy going to be arguments. But this particular time, let's say over the past year and a half, does seem to have been particularly toxic. And I can't think of a time since the late 1960s where it has been this bad. Now, I'm not saying there's deadly race riots going on. I'm not suggesting it is as bad as that time. But the sheer number of right wing, left wing violent confrontation seems to be happening now all the time. When I look at the likes of Boston Antifa and I look at the sort of warped logic that they have, it isn't just about the fact they're prepared to use violence, it's some of the warped thinking that they actually have. I mean, these are people who are active apologists for Islamism. These are people who feel that Donald Trump is a bigger threat than ISIS in terms of the world situation. In terms of, in my opinion, they have some very disturbing views on Islamism. If it's not apathy, it's outright apologism. And for an organization claiming to be anti-fascist, that is incredibly ironic, given that ISIS are absolute fascists, insofar as the sense of domination of other people. I mean, ISIS as an organization believes in the subjugation of people that they believe to be less than human. That's the definition of fascism. Um, of course, we could equally call Antifa a bunch of communist extremists. You know, communism should also be a taboo word, incidentally. So when we talk about fascism, I think it should be equally slanderous to call people a bunch of communists, because that's what they are. The point is, however you want to word it, the point is they are totalitarian in nature, and they are cards by nature. Um, the far left just make a complete joke out of themselves by the fact that they preach about tolerance and diversity, and yet there's such intolerant people. Look at Vet Valarka. Now, I think it's a complete disgrace that she was allowed to keep her job. There was a review. As far as I'm concerned, she should have been absolutely fired from the entire California school board system. Um, a nasty, unpleasant individual. And certainly there are extremes on the right as well. And, as someone in the centre, I don't want to take my eye off either side. There are extremes on the right. There's alt-right people who are outright white supremacists, no question about it. And in some cases, outright proud to be so. So I really sympathise with American moderates on both left and right who look at this and think, what the hell is happening to this country? What I would say is, why is it necessary to always get into these direct confrontations? I mean, what I would say to the right, to Trump supporters, is why not just let these people make a fool out of themselves? And I would say the same thing. If you really dislike Trump, why not just let Trump supporters have their demonstrations? Why is there this tendency to always have direct clashes? I would suggest, based on the videos that I've seen, it's mostly the far left that start the trouble. Mostly. I've seen videos where, okay, there's right-wing protesters saying provocative things, but I have to say, most of the footage that I've seen, it is the far left who start this stuff, who start the trouble. I guess Trump supporters would say we're the ones who finish it, but the point I'm making is I don't understand why there is this necessity to always get into confrontation. And it happens here as well, with the recent EDL, Britain First clashes, again with Antifa, Unite Against Fascism. Um, at the time, I was frustrated by the way that was covered because I feel that the press misreported key aspects of that. For example, they said that demonstrators were covering their faces. And because it was a Britain First EDL organised event, that gave the impression it was the right wingers who were covering their faces. It was actually the far left counter demonstrators. Now, like I say, I'm no fan of the EDL, Britain First, but the media has to be responsible in this in the way they report these things. And I would suggest that liberal and left wing media outlets have focused far more on the populist right than they have on the far left. That's wrong. Because when you have that sort of bias, then how can the wider public get a clear picture of what's going on? And I'm going to round this up. If you're interested in my videos, feel free to subscribe and check out any other videos that I have. Thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts.